did we meet? How did Joyce and I meet? And following. Okay, I was back in Toledo, going to the University of Toledo, and back attending my home church, which then was the North Cove Boulevard Church of God. A couple that had grown up in that church were now serving as missionaries in Kenya, Jim and Glenna Yutzi. They were home on a furlough and were visiting the church, as was often the case, and it was a Sunday evening, and they were there to show their slides and to tell us about their work on the mission field. Jim's stepmother was sort of the matchmaker, and she had really wanted me to date her daughter, which I did a couple of times during high school, but then her daughter went a separate way, and you can tell how separate it was. I can't even remember her name. So when it became apparent that I wasn't going to date her daughter, she was not satisfied that and decided that, well, okay, if you're not going to date my daughter, maybe you'll date her best friend. And so that was Joyce. So anyhow, it turned out that for this Sunday evening service, where Jim and Glenna were going to tell us about their missionary service, she invited Joyce to come that night. And in the course of that evening, she introduced Joyce and me. And so and coming out of that evening, we agreed that we would have a double date. Joyce and I would double date with her daughter and her boyfriend. The following week, we went on a double date and went bowling. So our first date was a date to go bowling. I don't even know who won. I just know that in the course of the bowling, Joyce had not bowled very often, if at all. And in the course of the bowling, she had released the ball and she had released it backward instead of forward down the alley. And it came rolling back against our feet as we were sitting back there behind the alley. And she said later, I figured that ended that relationship. We dated for 2 years. Our wedding was June the 6th, 1959. I graduated from the University of Toledo the previous Saturday, and so after 1 week of bachelorhood with a bachelor's degree, I got married. We went up into the Irish Hills of Michigan, which is just north of the Ohio-Michigan line. It's a beautiful area of gentle rolling land with lots of small lakes. And we went to a cottage that had been given to us as a wedding gift, 1 week's use of the cottage on Round Lake. After our marriage, we both had jobs. Joyce continuing to work as a cosmetologist, and I had my first teaching job beginning in September of '59. And it was during that first year of our job, we lived in the home that Joyce was raised in. Now, her mother had passed away. Her mother passed away in 1964, but we kept the home and actually lived in it while doing our doctorate, and then we lived in that home for that first year of our marriage. And then, but it was during that time we wanted to get our own home. Well, out in the little town of Maumee, outside of Toledo, on Katy Street, there was a contractor that was building homes. And they were offering special financing and so on. So it was after I'd gotten back from my military service and we knew I wasn't going to be deployed that we decided to have one of these little houses built for us. I paid a total of $13,800 for this house. It was a little 3-bedroom, 900-square-foot house that was our first home, but I don't remember what the monthly payments were.
Okay.
They were obviously affordable because I was only making $3,600 as a teacher. I never knew her father. Her father had left the home back when she was a child, so I did not know her father. I knew of him. I did know her father's parents. In fact, they lived on Kalima Drive, the same street that I'd lived on as a child, and they were one of my paper customers, my newspaper route. So I knew her grandparents. I did not know her father. Her mother was a feisty type, but she liked me, and so that took care of everything. And if there was ever any fuss, she would always take my side of it. And that was always sort of funny, and it made Joyce furious. I built a hi-fi set. That I didn't mention that, but in my college years, I put together with components, off-the-shelf components, I built a hi-fi set, and I'd crank that thing up, and I loved it. I've still got all the LPs that I had and used to play. Probably my favorite job I ever had was the 11 years that I was dean of the faculty at Anderson College, Anderson University. I received that appointment in effective July 1st of 1972, and I was in that position until July 1st of 1983. But that was 10 years in which I had the responsibility of providing and coordinating the work of the faculty at Anderson College. It was during those years that I was responsible for the recruitment of faculty and for the graceful retirement of faculty. And I enjoyed doing both of those things. I feel very good about the faculty that I think I built. I sold shoes then for Sears when I was doing my master's work. I worked for Sears on the weekends in their shoe department. They had, at the Sears store, we had that x-ray device where you'd step up, put your feet in, hit a button, and it would read out. You would see the measurements for your foot, and then you could take those to get a shoe size. Retirement. Well, number one, for whatever reason, I think it's cultural, I had made the decision early on. I was going to retire at age 65. It was just an expectation, and I think it was sort of a generational expectation. I think most everybody of my generation, we were raised to understand that at 65 was the retirement age. That's when you could get Social Security or pensions, any private pension plans or employee pension plans. They became available, they were fully vested, and they were yours to draw upon beginning age 65. That was generational. Now, I also knew that I was not going to be satisfied just sitting around the house. And so I rather intentionally started to develop networks in the community, getting involved largely through the United Way and also through my work with Kiwanis. I became aware and was finding my niche in the broader area of community service. And so upon retirement, I was able to move immediately into a very active life of community service as a volunteer. In that first year after retirement, I served as the governor of the District of Kiwanis, the District of Indiana Kiwanis, which had me traveling all over the state of Indiana, doing Kiwanis-related things. As I say, I was already involved in United Way kinds of things, and I was also on the board of the Community Mental Health Center, which gave me an outlet there. So, and then my church involvement. So those things all came together to give me really 4 areas of focus immediately after my retirement, and they continue to be areas in which I find involvement. Most memorable trip as a child that stands out is that trip I mentioned to the Michigan and the Upper Peninsula and so on that our family took. And then the interesting thing about that, then as a family with Joyce and I and the 2 kids, in 1964 took that same trip with a little pop-up camper. And so it was sort of interesting I don't know when we did that as a family early on in the 40s,
right.
But in 1964 we replicated that trip with a pop-up camper in the summer of 1964. In 1973, we went along with the Anderson University Chorale, Anderson College Choir then, to Europe for a 3-week Europe tour. The middle week of which we spent in Vienna. That was a fabulous thing. But what that did is that gave me some experience and confidence in renting a car and traveling on our own. Because the week that the choir was in Vienna, Joyce and I rented a car and we traveled into Switzerland, Austria, Germany, and Hungary during that week. So that was a good experience in all of that. But then that gave me confidence. In the year of our 25th wedding anniversary, we went back to Europe on our own for 3 weeks and rented a car and just motored all of Europe for 3 weeks that way. So those are two standouts where we did it alone. From 1964 on, all of our travel in the United States was with pulling a trailer. The one again that stands out so much for me was the year that we went we still had a pop-up. This was back, we went out and did the Colorado Rockies and spent 2 or 3 weeks. Oh, D.C. with Megan. That was in December, January. It was right at the end of the year after Joyce had passed away in 2008. So that would have been December 2008, January 2009. And we went, I had 2 weeks timeshare in Hilton Head. I decided to bank the first week and go to Washington, D.C. with Megan and take her, and then take the second week in Hilton Head on my own. And so that's what we did. So we drove to Washington, D.C., spent, I think, 4 days in that area, Washington, D.C., Mount Vernon, Williamsburg, and all of that. That was as I reflect on it, that was a wonderful time. She was at the right age. She was curious, and she was boy. I walked her legs off. It was a good trip from my perspective. It was a lot of fun. I was able to show her places that I don't know if she'll ever go back again or be able to. I took her to Williamsburg, and I was able to give her a night at King's Arms Tavern, and those kinds of real quality experiences. And then for me to then go on down to Hilton Head, I put her on a plane in Richmond, and she flew home. That was the first time that I don't know if it was the first time she'd flown, but it was the first time she'd flown alone.
I took a couple trips with Ron that I know of. One was a trip to New Orleans, and one was a whitewater rafting.
Yeah, the whitewater rafting, both of those were in conjunction with a Kiwanis International Convention. The whitewater rafting, he went with us to the Kiwanis International Convention in Salt Lake City. And again, he and I stayed on a week after that. Joyce was teaching summer school and had to get back to Indiana to teach summer school. So she flew back. Ron and I rented a car, and we did the Utah area and Utah and some of Colorado. But while still in Utah, we did the whitewater rafting down whatever that river is now. I don't remember. What was the river in Utah?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
It was a lot of fun.
But we did that then. And the other experience was, we went. He went with me to New Orleans for the International Convention, Kiwanis International Convention there. He also went one other time to an international convention with me, Salt Lake City, but then one other one where you worked in the bookstore. Or worked in the store, wasn't that? Maybe that was Indianapolis. You worked in.
It was. I did work in Indianapolis.
Yeah, you worked the Indianapolis store, and you worked the New Orleans store.
Yeah, I worked in the New Orleans store. I also remember the Montreal.
Oh, did you go to Montreal?
We went to Montreal.
I'd forgotten that. Okay.
We had an amazing steak. We went to that steakhouse.
Yes. Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, anyhow. Yeah, Montreal, now that stands out too because of the transit system. Up there you had to go everywhere using the transit system. Phenomenal transit system.